Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to you all. I hope you guys are doing very well today and you're ready to start your week. I hope the Eid weekend and the days off suited you well. I hope treated you well, and I hope you guys had a wonderful time with friends, family, and also having a break from the whole month of Ramadan, which was quite, exhausting because of the heat and because of all the, external pressures that we're facing in the 21st century. But now I hope you guys are ready to get started with the rest of the year and implement the things that you have learned in the last 30 days. And now we're going full steam ahead. We're not going to ease you into the topics. We have a very important and very heavy topic to discuss today. It is actually International Day for the Elimination of Sexual Violence in Conflict. And I wanted to highlight the day that we're observing today because they also just had Eid. A lot of the world is seeing a lot of conflict, and a lot of Muslims are going through a lot of issues, be it in Kashmir, Palestine, Syria, more places. I can't really name everything right now, but we are highlighting it because even within Pakistan and our neighboring countries, we are seeing abuses and people being taken advantage of. Now, the theme for this year is Plight and Rights of Children Born of War, and the hashtag is End Rape in War. What we're seeing is that, a lot of issues that are being faced in conflict zones, they are actually the consequences and all the burden and all the stress is being put on the victim. We're seeing a lot of blaming of children in conflict zones, even if they're born from rape or all of these things. They're seen as children of the enemy, or they're seen as being bad luck. There's just so much out there that's attached to blaming the victims because of these conflicts and the atrocities that happen. And even within Pakistan, and I'm sorry to say this, we see that someone has broken the law, someone is doing something wrong, we blame the victim. And a lot of the times those victims tend to be women and they tend to be children. And we expect them to carry that burden when the actual perpetrator has been completely vindicated or is running around free. And our guests are going to also highlight a lot of psychological elements. There's a lot of trauma, stigma, there's poverty, there's poor health. Then the psychological elements, which are identity and the feeling of belonging. There's no acceptance from society, and then the physical health elements, which are people go for unsafe abortions, which then affects the mortality rate of the women. So to discuss all of this, we've been joined by some wonderful guests. We have been joined by Afsha Tehseen. She is a social activist. She is also a development expert who has also worked with UNICEF and focusing on child protection. Assalamu alaikum, good morning.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Besides Afsha Tehseen, we've been joined by Arsalan Jogizai. He is a counselor at Therapy Works. Assalamu alaikum, good morning.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Besides Arsalan, we've been joined by Zara Maqbool. She's also a counselor at Therapy Works, and she's visiting us after ages. Assalamu alaikum, good morning.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Great to have you back. Okay, so I'm going to start with Afsha. We're going to talk about the actual issues that are taking place on the ground. Then we're going to ask our resident therapist today what is actually happening and how can we increase our empathy for those people. So Afsha, tell me, why do we feel the need that we need to observe this day? Because it only started in 2016.
Thank you very much, Maha. We should observe this way because normally whenever there is any sort of disaster, be it a man-made disaster or natural disaster, in both cases, men, women, particularly children suffer. And the strategies of disaster are that you have two types of response mechanisms. One is direct response, which includes relief and other basic services like supplies, medicines, shelter and other sorts of things. And the second phase is called the rehabilitation. And overall, all over the world, whenever we have such emergency situations and conflict situations, normally all the humanitarian organizations primarily focus on the relief services, which is easy, which is tangible, which can be counted, which can be reported, properly. And when you give something, tangible to people, you are visible, they are visible, and there is less chance of, your credibility. But when it comes to rehabilitation, and I'm talking about definitely the integration to back society, but also the in all terms their social, mental rehabilitation, their psychosocial support and these type of issues. This sometimes either ignored, or if it takes, it is very less in ratio, because it takes a long-term process, lots of energies, lots of resources and lots of long-term work required. So this is mostly a neglected area. And the other thing is that as I mentioned, that shelter, tents, medicines, food is visible. These activities and these type of recovery efforts are not visible. And the stigmas, the issues which are soft, related to our mind, our soul and other aspects, social aspects, they are not visible. That's why they are not covered properly.
Exactly. So this is what I want to move on to with our guests. So Arsalan, tell me, there's a lot of stigma attached to being a victim with, I mean, this is, I guess, not just in Pakistan, but we live here, so I can talk from that. But we are seeing this happening, with this whole, people who go to these conflict zones and they're trying to find shelter, refugees, So tell us, why is there so much stigma attached with victims?
So that's a really good question. I mean, there's many reasons behind it, but I guess one of the things that's most difficult for us to do is to look at ourselves. To look at ourselves and take responsibility for what happens in our lives and in the lives of those around us. So when we blame the victim, we don't want to fully acknowledge the problem.
Okay.
We don't want to fully acknowledge the fact that this has happened. It's a way of, I think, just trivializing and minimizing the problem.
Okay.
Because they don't want to empathize. We don't want to empathize with the victim because it's painful.
And then that would make us have to take some action about it.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so Zara, before I get into, because it's about the rights of children born in war, but I just want to break down people who are in conflict, the men and the women who are engaged in the actual conflict. What's the psychology behind actually taking advantage of maybe a woman or a child and, doing terrible things to them or putting them through stuff? What's the mentality? Are they psychopaths? What's happening?
I think it's something like that Stockholm syndrome, if you're familiar with that. A lot of people question why sometimes a woman who has been raped or who has suffered from sexual oppression ends up feeling so attached to the oppressor or the persecutor.
Okay, so that's the victim, but I'm talking about the person who is taking advantage of those people in that conflict zone. What's the psychology behind that?
I think it's a very general question that you're asking, because it depends on. So I mean, I'm not.
Yes, it's general because you're the expert. You're supposed to tell me.
So what I'm saying is that one wouldn't really know what the situation is. So maybe generally you can say that there is a lot of aggression, there's a lot of repression that man is facing. So of course he would sort of displace all of that, towards the female. But I would say maybe in certain situations that is not the case. That it's not coming from a place of aggression.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Normally, if you observe the situations wherever there is a free place, wherever there is absence of any law, wherever there is absence of any surveillance, and when you have free hand to go and do those things, and you carry with you this responsibility that you are going to support them. So you have a better disguised form and that flag, and you can then do it very easily, because otherwise if you do it in normal situations where all the legal instruments are in place, our law enforcing agencies and other such systems is in place, it is very difficult.
Okay.
So
it's less psychological.
opportunity. Though they are the psychologists, but normally what I have heard, because I've been working with psychologists, that they are very normal people. It's not that they are abnormal people or something different with them. They are normal people, but they get space due to that very vulnerable situation.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to find out. So that's what we did. So it's not always like they have some psychological issue.
I just wanted to actually disagree with you a little bit, because I feel what you're saying then is that we're just the way civilized because we have rules.
Yeah.
I'd like to believe that us as human beings have some innate sense of morality to do, but I understand what you're saying.
Up to a certain extent it's rules, but I'm saying that normally in society, if you see in Pakistan, there were so many cases of abuse. There were normal people in society, so they were just engaged. It's not that they had certain very medical sort of abnormal state of mind. So that's what I
agree with that point that you're making. But what I'm saying is that I think there are some people in society who do have a lot of psychological issues.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening a lot of times in conflict situations is that we kind of get carried away with the group psychology.
Right.
Yeah.
So if somebody perpetrates, in their regiment, let's say if it's the army, then, it almost like has this pressure. Everybody has this pressure to
Group
do the same.
mentality, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And we've discussed this multiple times on the show. So that's fine too. So now I had a point, but they were having a really good discussion. I couldn't interrupt it. Okay, so now Lord of the Flies, that's what I wanted to say. Like the kids are abandoned on an island. Some have that morality, some go towards the violent way. They even end up killing a child. I'm sorry for those who haven't read it. So I won't tell you which one. But so, I guess that's the age-old, it's the age-old debate, isn't it? Are we born with a sense of responsibility and morality? But we're going away from the point. I want to bring it back now. So now the thing is about, it's about the plight and the rights of the children. So we're seeing a lot of lack of acceptance within the society. There's no belonging. The child that's going through the issues, Zara, I want to ask you this. You're born out of conflict and your mother was raped. You had a very interesting element. It's not just a society, it's an internal battle too.
It's a relationship between the mother and child.
So could you tell me about the mother and child thing? What potential problems could we face and how can we overcome them?
So I think, like earlier when we were discussing this, that it's very important to make the mother safe post the trauma.
Okay.
Safety is something which is very important, that she has to feel safe post the trauma to resolve whatever she went through.
Okay.
And if that is unresolved, and we do see around us that there's not a lot of support that is there for the victims of sexual abuse or oppression or rape. So a lot of those unresolved feelings would most likely get transferred to the child.
Right.
Maybe not consciously, but unconsciously also a lot of material would get,
like the resentment, the
anger. The resentment, and of course if the child is a reminder of what happened to the mother.
Okay.
And then child has to process that as well. And here then disclosure comes as well. Do you tell the child, the entire situation or not? What are
I didn't even think about the disclosure element as well. So what are they supposed to do? Because this whole day is because there aren't enough.
And I just wanted to add one thing. I was reading up that the child can wonder what parts of me are from the father who raped my mother, and what parts. So there's identity crisis as well that he'll be going through.
Exactly. So Arsalan, tell me, what kind of systems do we need to set up to help these victims?
Yeah,
and what's the role of the communities as well?
Absolutely. The stigma is not just from the family or the mother or from the relatives, it's also from society. And this is not something that has a quick fix. Like Afshan was saying, a concerted effort over a long period of time is required. And I think this is where the state needs to step in and have these, generate awareness that, these sorts of issues need to be addressed and not shoved under the carpet. Have support services provided to some of these people, destigmatize some of the counseling work and the psychological therapies, the stigma that only crazy people go to counselors.
No,
which
they
is
don't, guys.
No.
We've been single for 5 years, they don't. Okay.
Yeah, so the state needs to play a really important role, and even our religious leaders and politicians and all of them, we all have a joint responsibility to, take ownership of what's actually happening in our society.
Okay, and that's a very good point raised by Zara and Arsalan, because if you look at the last 30 days of Ramadan where we were doing all those shows, that's exactly, it's about social responsibility, it's about looking after the vulnerable in society. But now the people that are living, because you've worked with these organizations which go into these conflict zones. Those conflicts aren't ending, or they have no end in sight at times. How are we supposed to implement the suggestions of having a concerted psychological kind of intervention for these people when, even development workers aren't even able to access these areas at a lot of time, and they're taken away because of safety? So what are we supposed to do?
In this response mechanism, definitely initially there is a relief phase. Once it is over, then they work on the response mechanism. So psychosocial support is one of the core components in rehabilitation. So they mostly, if you see in Pakistan, there was not as such any idea about psychosocial support before 2005 earthquake. It was after that that people started realizing that this is one of the very important components if you really want to integrate people in society and again help them to gain their mental health. And that is one of the core, their interventions.
Okay, great.
And other than that, they again other activities include engagement of opinion makers in society. Once they, as you rightly pointed out, that there should be proper government mechanisms in place where you will be, putting them where they will be based after getting them out from those areas, and will they be properly places which will be ensuring the child protection policies and mechanisms where children will be saved, and all those services being provided them are based on the, under all the requirements of child protection policy. But in all those aspects, I must be saying that society plays a very important role, because once that initial phase is over, the next phase can never be, good for them until you engage all the relevant influentials in society, opinion makers, religious leaders, because normally social norms and the taboos and all these such bad practices which affect children, mothers and all those people, and they are never accepted in society, particularly if you are engaged in any such war zones where you are considered, you have been living with the enemies. So those kind of stigmas are even more harmful for those people to come back and live in those societies, and particularly when there were certain children born out of,
But like Zara's already mentioned the Stockholm
Yeah.
syndrome.
I
and
just
so
wanted
there's
to add
multiple-
one thing,
Yes.
that before all these things, we need to have a discussion on this. Like, honestly speaking, when I came to know of the topic, I mean, I hadn't even thought of it, and I'm in the field.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying is we don't talk of these things.
Yeah.
For all of this to happen, the more we talk, the more comfortable we will be to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's actually very surprising because, this country has seen
Yeah, and
wars,
still we
and it
don't.
has seen, an influx of kind of the global kind of scene that we've been dragged into as well. So it's surprising.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a very good point that you've raised. Yeah, it kind of threw me off there. It wasn't.
Yeah.
So now the thing is, okay, that changes. The next question now has changed from what it was going to be. Why are we so ignorant to it? No, because we're faced with it. I mean,
Right.
have we buried our heads that much in the sand that we just cannot even be bothered anymore? What's happening?
So let me just paint a picture here.
Okay.
Right? So we all have experienced fear in our lives. We've
Yes.
gone through fearful experiences. Now imagine for a second that state of fear is your complete existence.
Yeah.
24 hours a day, and you grow up with that belief. When your personality is being developed, you grow up with that suspicion, with that hypervigilance, with that anxiety and that negative worldview, right? So there's a lot of pain there. And I think the ignorance really stems from the fact that we don't want to feel pain. We don't want to, we're inherently, I think people are good. But like, we just don't want to feel the pain. That's why it's easier to just say, I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything bad happening. Everything's great. Everything's perfect. It's us trying to maybe like take care of our own anxieties of looking at some of these things.
I think more than pain, and then shame. I think shaming is so much. There's a lot of shame to talk of these things, like this need to hide ourselves, because there's a lot of shame around a lot of topics, and we're not comfortable talking about it. So,
Okay, so
shame has a very strong place.
yeah, I find that, this is the thing, it is our job to kind of give you the balanced narrative of what's happening within the country. But this is actually an issue that is an international global issue. However, we do have it within our borders or our neighboring borders. And it's very hard to find the silver lining for me today, and I don't want to be too happy and positive about it, because so many people are suffering, and I don't want to negate their feelings and what they're going through. And especially, if they stumble across it, I don't want to be like, oh, everything's great, because it's not. Like, one person suffering is too much, according to Islam anyway. So now, Afsha, please give me some good news.
Actually, I don't think I can give you some good news,
Okay.
because in fact, very sorry to say that the misery starts from there. Once that initial phase is over, then those children are not only victim of abuse or sexual abuse during those times, but after that they become more vulnerable in terms of poverty, in terms of
Safety,
social
yeah.
exclusion, and then all types of commercial, sexual, mental, physical abuse, then child labor, slavery, no sense of belonging, not acceptance from a society, no such as such any economic support available, absence of any government mechanisms. So all these major factors, play their part very brutally to further, drag them and marginalize them. So this is a sad story, and we don't have such strong support mechanisms in place in countries, and Pakistan is one of such country. In Pakistan, we don't have any in near future such example of these type of things in children war conflict, but disasters you see. Once this disaster took place, after it is over, those families were never reintegrated. They were never rehabilitated. And they could not even, most of them could not even go back to their places.
Okay,
and lots of, even let me just tell you, and then if you disintegrate, take the gender aspect of it, boy and girl in our country, girls are even more vulnerable. They are even more victims of abuse. I remember when there was 2005 earthquake and we used to go there, lots of people had to lay off their burden and get their daughters married to unknown people, so that they should not have this responsibility on them. Once, what if somebody comes them and they don't have a shelter, they don't have a place, and they had much more chances of sexual abuse and other exploitation, or they never know where they send their daughters.
Okay.
So all such type of many sad stories are there. If you take a case of any child, any girl, any boy, be it Pakistan or be it any other country, very sad story, and not much has been done up till now.
Okay, well, I know that the disaster management and all of that, they have taken a lot of steps to kind of rehabilitate it. But I think next time we will ask about this.
Add on, and then if after these,
But
causes are over, the amputations, the maimings, those things happen. Those children are further have no place in society.
Okay, so this is the thing. So we've done multiple shows on it. So there is the official stuff that's going on. There's a lot of people, biggest humanitarian efforts as well, money coming in from all over the world and all that stuff. But then obviously there's always that darker side, which we're not always aware of. So there are people slipping through the cracks, and when the crack is quite big, there's quite a few people slipping through. Okay, so now, well, that's the thing. So this element that. Well, what do you have to say to everything that I've said? I don't even know what to. I do have the question, but I want you to add.
Yeah, I guess the message I really want to send is that a lot of this trauma that happens, it then passes down through generations, and what we need to recognize is that any trauma in our society affects the whole society.
Okay.
It will affect the society through those people who have been traumatized. We're living with them. There are people you see out on the street. There are people you deal with. You will be affected by that trauma. The silver lining I want to that you were looking for is sort of at least in my field, I am seeing now that people are starting to recognize the importance of psychological support.
Okay.
And the thing is that if you give psychological support early on, right when the trauma happens, we know trauma can be healed. But if you let it fester just because you don't want to look at it, it's just going to be a bigger problem to solve later on.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. I think it's also very important to pay attention to the child who's born out of that situation. Compared to girls, boys would be ignored. I mean, that's my feeling. There'll be more attention if it's a girl child. Just imagine that child, that boy child raising up to be a male and never having that space to resolve that. So somehow gender discrimination over there can really have a very negative impact.
Yeah, and this is the thing, I think when it comes to conflict, there are certain things that girls are more vulnerable to, but the boys also as well.
Of course, more because, because I think more attention is paid at the end of the day. We do talk of women more in this capacity than men. Yeah. Whereas that boy can turn up into an adult and might repeat that pattern.
So everyone needs to have that kind of intervention that's being taken. Okay, so now the people that are running away from the social conflict, from the conflict, and you guys have talked about the acceptance and the social mechanisms which are not strong enough. What would because this is the thing, we have multiple organizations, international, local, in all of these countries and regions of conflict. They've been there for decades. Why isn't there, are things getting better? I mean, from what you've said, things aren't getting better.
I was just watching a some news on TV.
Yes.
It was in America, maybe there were some refugee children and they were rehabilitated, and some organization took the responsibility of taking care of them. And then one by one, many children were adopted as well. But then on BBC they said that they had no record of who adopted them, what happened afterwards. And then it's always a issue of resources as well. So particularly everything should be under the cover of law, and there should be proper follow-up, there should be proper legal system in place to see that if even people adopted them, what happened, that should be followed up, monitored for certain periods of time. And there should be proper reports of their I mean, up 6 monthly or quarterly or monthly, they should keep track of all those children. So normally, all over the world, we say it has not been very successfully implemented. Again, I must say that when there is war, there is hue and cry, there is noise in the media, everybody pays attention, because that is the time when you get money. Donors get money.
That's what I'm saying.
Everyone get money. You comes in the news. After that thing is over, everywhere there is no news. Then their real stigma and their issue starts. Then not much attention is paid, which should be paid. And we should, as he said, the one good thing is even in our South Asia and in our country, psychosocial support has been recognized. But overall, as UN has now this Convention on Children in Armed Conflict, Pakistan has also signed it with of the good news. But then it is not only about signing, it is about keeping it in one of your core national program agenda, and then having budgeting about it, and then implementation to having proper institutions in place.
Absolutely. So, but that's the thing. We're not, we know what the government needs to do. We're not a political show. So the thing is that, the government needs to do that, and it's our responsibility to highlight it. But the thing is, it's also about the individual social responsibility. One thing, before we move on, I want to talk about what you've mentioned, that until it's in the news, then it is not paid attention to, and then they all get the money. Now, what we're also seeing in these conflict zones is that these organizations that are going to help, they are also they are the perpetrators as well. We're seeing lots of news about I don't want to take anyone's name or anything, but troops being stationed to go and actually help and resolve an issue, but they are the ones who are perpetrating the sexual offenses against children, against women, against men. So what would you say regarding that? Because already people have a bit of a suspicion against these organizations. Then you get all the money being pumped, then you get all the crimes being committed, and then everyone kind of, ducking the responsibility.
Actually, this is not something new, because I've been working on child protection, or even our country or any other country, it happens. All those pedophiles individually, and then lots of people under the cover of different organizations, they try to get engaged through jobs and go there, or even,
and they get through.
Even the philanthropists, they always wait for such opportunities. So luckily, last year, everybody knows names of those organizations who were then picked up and highlighted, and lots of development community and social media and all the globally people condemned them, and their license were cancelled. And there were 2 organizations mainly who were again, other than the armed troops who do it very, very, in a routine. So luckily, when this was highlighted, people picked it up. But normally, it happens. That's why, because there is no one else to complain about it. The people they work for is already vulnerable. Rather, they have to give those favors to get some favor. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
So that's the situation where they get benefit from, and these are very sad realities that happens. We had been many cases. Even long ago, we had a case where when these in such disasters, where there were certain organizations who adopt children, there was a person who came from all the way from another country program as a philanthropist. He invested lots of money and he took children. It was after 1 or 2 years that they came to know he was a pedophile himself. So such things definitely happen. It's a sad story. There should be mechanism normally, because there is issues of access. These people cannot access people. There is hardly less time to have one-to-one contact, and they can't make proper case studies, proper stories about individuals and then share them. So if you starting engaging them, particularly, that's why now it is said that child protection officers, child protection advisors, people who are properly trained in child protection mechanisms, people who are properly engaged, how to engage with children, and without highlighting their issue, pick it up indirectly and then share it. So, you know, these type of mechanisms are too much needed, and that's why if we don't have such mechanism, we will never be able to eliminate this thing.
Okay, so that's the reality of it. And we don't have such mechanisms because even this year we've been hearing about these troops abusing the people they're supposed to be, you know, trusting. And, you know, and then you know, it's not me attacking anyone, but, you know, after being here for 5 years, you kind of start seeing patterns and you're like, well, the money's coming in. And, you know, people are trying and they're talking about it. But then you see the money going to other places. And then when you hear about these issues, it's like, well, if you invested more on the actual system and the people that you are expecting to take these things forward, then surely you will have better results. Sarah,
And
so I'm getting very frustrated with this conversation. It's
I
ridiculous.
just want to add to what you were saying. I think that was a very important point about individual social responsibility. Like if I can speak for myself right now, that I'm just going to sit here and if I will just talk about it, that's not me contributing to this cause.
Absolutely.
Whereas I can run a process group, I can get those, because I do come across, you know, adult survivors of sexual abuse. And, you know, in the West, I'm sure there's maybe blaming the government and the system, but there's a lot of ownership people take.
Yes.
There are multiple groups, you know, for addiction and for...
Yes.
So why not do that instead of just focusing on the government?
Yeah, and this is like a really common problem. Like, you know, I mean, I was reading a statistic, something like 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 boys will experience some sort of sexual abuse before the age of 18. You know, that's what that means is we all know people who have gone through this in our very close, intimate relationships.
But they all want to protect the person who did it to them.
Yes, because you know they feel that they did something wrong because they don't feel safe enough to express what they need to say. And I just want to add is that I think maybe it's because I'm a counselor, so I'm a bit biased, is that the best work we can all do is to work on ourselves. In our own psychological growth, looking at our own values, looking at how are we living our lives. And this is painful, difficult work. And if like enough people, not even everybody doesn't have to do it, even if enough people do it, it will make a change in society.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know how you were saying about protecting the abuser, it's not protection which is why they do not sort of come forward. It's lack of safety. Because who are they going to go to? Like, you know, the entire thing just starts sort of unfolding then.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to control it. So it's
Especially if that person has been given the role of looking after you, and then who do you turn to? Okay, so we are, you know, we have a few minutes left. So, you know, it is a very sad state of affairs. That's why, you know, it was passed, and that's why the first, you know, International Day for Elimination of Sexual Violence in Conflict was raised. And, you know, we've seen the nature of conflict change drastically in the last few decades as well. But Afsha, you know, what are we going to do? How can the individual, you know, people who are watching, how can they get involved? And, you know, some positive information that they can kind of jump on board.
You know, first of all, we have to accept and acknowledge and register that this is an issue. Because normally in society, in our society particularly, it is considered a social stigma. And if whoever tries to break the stereotype and this taboo, all the damage goes to him or her.
Yeah.
And they rather become a victim of abuse and victim of, you know, all type of bad things from society. And then their acceptance is at stake. And if she is a girl, her, you know, acceptance is more at stake, that she will not be accepted, she will not be, you know, married, and, you know,
Honor,
she cannot,
respect,
she will not earn respect in her later in her life. And the first influencers are always her family to keep quiet, not to share it. So thanks to media, because these past 2-3 years, there has been lots of openness, there has been lots of, you know, discussion upon it. I remember 12 years before, when I was working in an organization, we decided to work on child protection and engage schools. There was lots of hue and cry even from within the staff. No, you train us separately and then you train all the female staff separately. I said, we are the social catalysts. We are supposed to bring change. If we can't sit together and discuss child sexual abuse, how can we go and change the mindset of those people who are reluctant, who think it's something very bad to talk about? They always try to hide it. So first of all, we have to work on the society to break this social stigma. There is nothing harm in it. We have to point our finger towards the one who is the abuser, not towards the one who is the victim. So that is it. And besides, on the organizational level, since whenever there are such armed conflicts and such things, all the donors and other, community they work in, be it a work on health, be it, education, be it water and sanitation, because health, education, water and sanitation, food and shelter, these are 4 areas in which you work. But then that's what we child protection people always advocate, that be it any service delivery intervention you have, child protection should be a cross-cutting thing. Child protection lens, child protection, practices should be part of those interventions.
Absolutely.
Do it through that lens.
Okay.
Never neglect that you are providing
Separate
food,
it, yeah.
and you to neglect the protection
Yeah.
lens, and you do, in which you can then give harm to the children who you will be providing food or you will be providing
Okay.
shelter. So that is one good way
One
of
holistic
being very
approach.
professionally, holistically doing those things.
Wonderful. Arslan, these points, about breaking the stigma attached, even within our society, we don't want to talk about it. What can we do? What would you say to all our viewers?
I think what we're doing here, first of all, is brilliant that we're talking about it. For the viewers, like I said, my message is to do the work on yourselves. That's the best gift you can give anyone, because we can only change ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Individually, and I think that mindset, at least in the cities, is starting to change in the educated class. We see a lot of people coming for counseling, and people are benefiting from it. So the word has started to spread.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So my message is to just take a keen look at oneself and do the work.
Start from yourself, and
Yes.
then it will then spread. Excellent.
Yes.
How about yourself?
Yeah, so I think the key message I would like to give is that you don't have to be a counselor to believe if someone comes to you with this story, with sharing their views. Most commonly what I've experienced with my clients is that people do not believe if they finally have the courage to share what has happened. So believe someone if they, if they've finally had the guts to share what they went through, and don't get into the narration of the story and try to, because that's what we do. We try to get the facts, and we try to maybe
It's just for our own kicks, because we don't need that information.
So if someone comes to you, believe them. That should be just, the first thing.
Okay.
And then
And
you can go
listen.
from, and
Just
listen
listen.
and believe.
Yeah.
I think, okay, so thank you so much for being here. It was a very heavy topic to start just after Eid, but this is what's happening around the world. So thank you so much for taking the time out. Everyone, I apologize for the kind of heaviness, but in the morning, however, it's about realizing what a privileged position we stand in. I'm not out here, we're not here to preach at you, we're not here to make you guys feel bad, but it's just that it's about our individual efforts. It's about making sure we are a voice for the voiceless, and we stand up for the people who cannot. And with that, if you would like any information about this day, if you have yourself, if you are in conflict, if you are a victim of conflict or any form of abuse or anything like that, we can guide you to the right people. That I have been advocating this positive mental health thing for the last 5 years as well. We've done multiple shows. You can go and look. So if you would like any information, log on to our Facebook fan page, which is with the name of World This Morning. Our Twitter page, World This Morning without a G. Our Daily Motion and YouTube page, World This Morning. The repeat will be at 11:05 p.m. this evening, and it will be then uploaded. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Thanks.